Hello and welcome to Film du Siècle, the film and media channel focused on all things 90s and 2000s. This week, Seb and Olly will be discussing Air Force One.
Hello and welcome to Film du Siècle, and boy do we have a treat for you. The classic 1997 film, Air Force One.
Oh wow.
Yes.
He said in surprise even though he knew it was coming.
I quite like this film. The screenwriter, interestingly enough, is working on a Nick Fury biopic at the moment.
Interesting.
It feels right, doesn't it?
It does.
Yes. So what's your memories of this film, Ollie? You have seen it before, but I think you've only seen it once with me a few years ago.
Yeah, on Netflix with the awful sub job.
Oh, that was so terrible. Right, I'm going to explain this.
Okay.
The main villains of this film are this group of Russian/Kazakhstani terrorists who are trying to restore the Soviet Union. And of course, they spend most of the movie speaking in Russian to each other, because of course they would. But since these are very important characters to the plot, you need to understand what they're saying for their motivations and their actions to make sense. So, what Netflix did when they had the important job of subtitling the dialogue, which is fully subtitled in the cinematic release, is do none of that and just put speaks in Russian every time one of the terrorists said something.
Oh my god.
It made the movie unintelligible. I sort of had to go through the movie explaining things to Ollie.
I was there, I saw it, I believe you, but it still doesn't seem real.
I hope that whoever was responsible for that got fired or something, because that's the worst thing I've ever seen on Netflix.
Well, because that happened...
And I've seen the Death Note movie.
Because that happened, when Lord of the Rings was on Netflix, I gave that a look and I turned on subtitles, and they don't put speaks in Elvish on the subtitles when you turn subtitles on, even though the subtitles are already there, but they do sort of put another set of subtitles on, which are the phonetics of the Elvish language that they are using.
Why?
I don't know.
I don't understand this.
Who does the subtitles at Netflix and why?
Off with their heads. But before you saw this film with me, it's one of those that you were telling me you saw clips of, like when the family were watching on the TV or whenever it was on.
I think my dad was watching it once, and I happened to be in the room at one point.
Yeah.
I remember the bit where Harrison Ford is shooting at the toilets. I think he's trying to get the terrorists or something. And
what kind of a crazy president shoots toilets?
Well, that's what I remember. I said to Dad, why is he doing that? And he said, to shoot whoever's in the toilet.
Die, you non-American sons of bitches. Sir, there's nobody in the toilets. I know. Die, you porcelain fuckers.
Right.
No.
Yeah. So, and that's basically all I remembered from that time. And from the time I saw it with you, I remember speaks in Russian. And
I remember speaks in Russian.
And that was several years ago. I remember liking the film.
Me too.
But I don't really have much memory of it because I only saw it in full that one time.
As a contrast, I've probably seen this movie 100 times. And it's not just because of the movie. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to old videos, VCRs as the Americans call them. I used to have such a huge collection. I had all the Bonds, I had a lot of The Simpsons, had all the Star Wars, all the Lord of the Rings, everything you could possibly want. I think I even had all the Mr. Beans, but I digress. I had this tape that was taped in 1999, just before the millennium, of the TV premiere of Air Force One on Channel 5. And I would re-watch it, not just because I liked the movie, because obviously I did, but also because it was fascinating to me watching all these old adverts, watching the news breaks, because back then they had news breaks in the middle of movies. I think at the time there was the presidential election in America. Well, that was in 2000, but I believe they were doing the, what do you call the heats? The primaries. They were doing the primaries, and they're like, oh, George Bush has gone here, and it was just a fascinating time capsule. It was really interesting. And the adverts were fascinating, because they're all the old AOL adverts, like, get a free AOL CD today, and that kind of thing, which obviously hasn't been a thing for a very long time.
Yeah, that's a timestamp.
Also, there was an advert for Phantom Menace on video and DVD, and this was the first big movie I remember coming out on DVD. This was back when hardly anyone had a DVD player and they were the size of a table. And I remember that advert vividly because that for some reason they said, this DVD is only available for a limited amount of time, and then it cut to Obi-Wan saying, we're running out of time.
I had a modest collection of video cassettes. I remember I had The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones.
Oh, I did.
The last one I got was Lord of the Rings Return of the King.
Ooh, that's a very good choice. I had that.
Because that was about when DVDs had all but killed VHS.
Yes. The last one I remember buying was The Incredibles.
Oh.
But I kept up quite a big collection until several years ago when we moved house. And sadly I got rid of nearly all of them. But I did keep that VHS taped copy of Air Force One because it's sentimental to me for whatever reason. So this movie is therefore sentimental to me beyond how good it is, even though I do think it's a good movie.
Wow, yeah.
So,
all right.
Considering this is a movie you've only seen once or twice, and this is a film that I'm quite sentimental for, I'll be quite interested to see what we have to say when we give it a watch.
Yeah, let's watch it.
Yeah, let's stick it on and we will be back with you. And we're back in the room. We have just watched Air Force One. So, I suppose the real question is, Ollie, did you like it? Was it wicked?
I did, yes. I don't know whether I would say I was loving it, but it was a very enjoyable film.
You're at least loving it like this, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We made that joke last week.
I know, it's still not old for me. Sorry about that. So, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I seem to have suffered a bit of a Mandela effect, because I thought it was Harrison Ford that was shooting at the toilets. It wasn't, it was the terrorists. Which makes a lot more sense.
He was hiding in the toilets. Although, for some reason, as a kid, that sound effect that plays when they open the last cubicle and the president's not there made it sound like he was flushing himself down the toilet to avoid the terrorists. Obviously, he must have escaped through some kind of vent or something, but it's just the way the door opens, it's like that. It's just as good as ever for me. I quite enjoy this film. It's very idealistic and it's very charming in the way it portrays its characters, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to like this guy.
It seems like the guy that betrays him at the end had a story that was cut. It's obviously not meant to be a twist, like an 11th hour twist, which is what it comes off as, because you see him shoot those guys at the beginning.
Yeah. And you see him throw the weapons for terrorists at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you see him looking shifty throughout the movie.
Yeah, so were there some deleted scenes or something? Because
I think there were, because
it seems like there would have been.
Yes, I did actually read up on this, and there were some deleted scenes explaining his motivation, but apparently they were cut from the film because it wasn't very important, but I don't know why he did what he did. What did he have to gain from this?
It was a bit important.
Yeah, it was very important considering he was one of the president's right-hand men and he betrayed him to the terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something that someone just does on a whim.
And it's not even like he did a heel turn because he did this from the very beginning. This was his plan all along. And
Yeah.
when you're putting in a sort of inside man betrayal storyline, then you can either go about it two ways. You can either have it as a complete shock at the end when it's revealed, which they sort of do because the other right-hand man goes like, "It was you?" when he shoots him and turns on the president at the very end. Or you reveal it at the beginning and you put in an arc explaining the character's motivations, like in The Matrix, where you had Cypher who betrayed them, but it's not a twist because, well, you see this fairly early on and it's explained why he betrays them. So you either have a compelling character arc, or you just have a complete shock twist for the sake of shock. And they sort of go with neither option.
Yeah, I mean, if you got rid of that scene at the beginning where he shoots the guys, it would be a total surprise.
Yeah.
But by the time he betrays the president, I'd forgot that.
Yeah, I think that they're gambling that the audience will have some sort of amnesia effect for the sake of shock.
They could have just sprinkled in a couple of scenes here and there of him doing shifty things so that people remember, oh yeah, he's a baddie. And then, like, it doesn't really matter why he's doing what he's doing, even though it does. But, you know, the suspense would still be there.
But I think the most unrealistic aspect of this movie, and it does have some preposterous moments, is how nice the president is.
Well, yeah.
I'm not trying to be satirical or anything, but I don't care what this guy's politics is. He's just a nice guy. I mean, all he cares about is his family. As soon as the plane's being hijacked, the first thing he asks is, "Where is my family?" He's evacuated off the plane, but he stays behind without telling anybody so he can rescue everyone. And this is an action flick. The reason why he can fight the terrorists is because he was a former Navy SEAL, I think. He had some military experience anyway. He's a war veteran.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool because this is 50s, as in his 50s, Harrison Ford. So he could still do these action roles, but he wasn't as spryly as he used to be. So this was the perfect role for him at the time.
He's also immediately established as being a very moral president, a very upstanding person.
Yes.
So I really think that he's meant to be like an aspirational president, like the writer's idea of what the president should be.
Definitely.
Rather than any reflection of any living president.
Well, exactly.
Or dead, as the case may be.
I'm not sure that any living or dead president could live up to how pure this guy was.
Yeah, true.
Because I like how the first scene you see of him is during this dinner in Moscow after they've arrested this rogue sort of military dictator who's wreaking havoc in Kazakhstan. He's addressing the Russian premier in Russian and saying how he's very sorry for everything his people have gone through and he'll do everything to support them. And I just like that we've got a character who has made the effort to learn all these things and connect with his peers.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
What I think it really speaks volumes about this main character is how everybody talks about him. His daughter calls him a great man and obviously respects and loves him. His wife does, obviously. Well, the vice president, there's a moment where the president is captured by the terrorists, and the cabinet quite rightly say he's under duress, he can't act as president. But she doesn't sign the paperwork that would allow her to become president out of pure respect and faith in this man. And even the Russian premier has a lot of respect for him because he says if it means saving the president's life, he'll gladly release this dictator character who, it's sort of implied, if he was free, would easily be able to take over the whole of the USSR and bring back the Soviet Union. So he would let that happen if it meant saving his friend, and obviously he would be on the chopping block if that happened. So
yeah, that's something. This film, in that way, sort of reminds me of The Martian.
Yeah, go on.
Well, The Martian, even though there is an antagonist in this film and there wasn't in that one, there is no...
Mars was the antagonist. That fucker of a planet. Why can't you have oxygen like all the others?
Like, there's no infighting,
No.
is what I mean. Like, you'd expect, like, if this were made today, you'd expect that they'd let I don't know, the vice president would make a power grab, or that the Russians would be uncooperative, or something like that. But no, these are just very competent people who clearly know what they're doing their best to get the president to safety.
Yeah, and another thing I find quite compelling about that idea is that even the terrorists are competent. The terrorists make no mistakes. They fail in the end, but it's not because of their own drawbacks. It's basically because the president was better at fighting than the main terrorist was.
Yeah, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, and even then the Americans are extremely competent in this. None of what happens because of some sort of cheap error or blunder on anybody's part. And I like that because you could very easily write this movie to be that all of this is allowed to happen because of some catastrophe or mistake.
Or someone's general incompetence.
Yeah, obviously they managed to get on board the plane by killing and assuming the identities of several journalists. But they have no way of knowing this at this point, and the terrorists do a bang-up job of creating these false identities. It's not like it's any kind of huge negligence or incompetence on the part of the security staff.
No, that's true. Although, I do love some of the exposition. Like how when they explain that Air Force One has to carry the president.
At the beginning, yes. When the terrorist character's boarding the plane and saying, "Oh, but we've already had a baggage check." And he says, "Sir, this plane carries the President of the United States." Well, yes, it's Air Force One. It's got Air Force One written on it in the colours of Air Force One.
Yeah. They even cover the fact that the hull is reinforced so that they could fire guns on the plane. And, the question of, wouldn't that just sort of be ridiculously dangerous is not as much of an issue.
Well, no. Although I think that the whole Goldfinger effect is generally exaggerated for the sake of fiction. But it is dangerous anyway. But Air Force One, I think, does actually have that. The only thing in this movie that we know of that it doesn't have is the escape pod and the parachute ramp.
Ah.
But, again, a lot of the capabilities of Air Force One are confidential to this day for understandable reasons.
Yeah. And,
But that exposition about the capabilities of Air Force One is very good because it's given by the President's sister, whose job in this story is basically to show dignitaries and guests around the plane and tell them a bit about it. So, it's not done in an unorganic way.
No, not at all. And apparently Air Force One can fly so smoothly that you don't even need to pack booze properly.
Yes, they managed to get a Budweiser product placement.
Yeah, there was another brand too. What was it?
Perrier.
Oh, yeah.
Got to have that sparkling water on Air Force One, and you've got to very prominently display its brand for all to see.
Yeah. Just like you've got to prominently display that him looking at that milk carton that's got shot.
I love that moment because there's this idea they come up with partway through the plane to cause a fuel leak on board so that the plane has to refuel, which will give them an opportunity to descend to an altitude where they can escape via parachute. And the president gets this idea after a shootout with some of the terrorists where he sees a milk carton that's leaking because obviously it got hit by a bullet. He picks it up and stares at it for several seconds.
He stares at it incredulously, like he's surprised it's succumbed to a bullet wound.
Well, it's Air Force One milk, isn't it? It's stronger than the average milk. It can withstand a nuclear blast.
Could an Air Force One fridge withstand a nuclear blast?
Ah, that would explain events later on in Harrison Ford's life, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I just love how the way he looks at it, because obviously there's no other way to get across the idea that he's come up with. But he's in the middle of a combat situation and he takes the time to walk over to the fridge, pick up the milk and stare at it for several seconds.
Yeah.
He doesn't hide away because he knows the terrorists are coming. He takes his time with it.
Yeah. Look at that milk.
But I love the product placements because there's this basement set, which I think is excellent in Air Force One, which is sort of the cellar of the plane, where they store away lots of items, food and drinks. And for some reason, they do not wrap up the beers, and they do not wrap up the Perriers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Air Force One flies so smoothly, they just don't have to.
Exactly, they do not have to do that because at the end of the day, the movie has to make that sponsorship. Quite a good cast in this. I thought that the lead terrorist, played by Gary Oldman, was very, very good.
Oh yeah, brilliant stuff.
Apparently,
terrifying man.
Oh, he was. But for that reason, he decided not to do method acting for this one. Apparently, he was a joy on set and he was a laugh, and they had a very fun time.
Oh, good.
So he wasn't pretending to be a Russian terrorist and scaring little children on set.
Oh, that's a relief. Imagine being around that for days.
Yeah. Bizarrely, he did do that for Azkaban, though.
What?
Pretend to be a Russian terrorist. Now you'll die, boy with stick! But that's not even the character. Now you will die. I don't understand method acting, but apparently it works for people.
I mean, one of the scenes that got me a bit is where they shoot his sister.
Oh my god!
It's like he doesn't give himself up, but you can tell that he was wrestling with that decision.
Yes. Oh, that must have been so hard for him. Because it's very easy to miss that it is his sister. I must admit, when I was rewatching it, I spent about 10 minutes wondering who this character was.
Yeah.
But I liked the intro of this. It was very Indiana Jones, very much a textbook opening where the, again, very competent crack team of commandos arrest the leader of the, I suppose, rebellion?
Yeah.
Because another thing about the geopolitics of this movie is that there's a military dictatorship that's took over a good portion of Kazakhstan, and the leader of this seems to be inspiring to a lot of people, but he's captured at the beginning of the movie, and the goal of the terrorists is to let him go free, because then he can grow in strength and rebuild the old Soviet Union. And the Russian premier is obviously afraid of this, and obviously so is the president. How well did the film achieve its goals, and what were they?
Well, we'll probably go into how well it did financially on a future question, but an aspirational presidential figure, and a movie about coming together in a crisis to save people. I think it did those things very well.
Yes, it tells quite a heartwarming story.
Yeah, so jolly cooperation.
Yeah, and it's the most innocent form of patriotism, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose it would be.
Yeah, it's quite interesting looking at this from the lens of today, because the first thing the president does is give a speech about how they will not negotiate with terrorists and they will fight from wherever they appear in the world. And then, as soon as he gets on the plane, there's some sort of briefing about the Iraqis mobilising and him saying, send the Nimitz back in. So there's perhaps the preliminary start of a war there, which, by today's eyes, probably doesn't age so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all he really wanted to do at that point was watch the damn football game.
Yeah. There was another funny moment in that movie when the terrorists attack and he gets moved into another room. I could have sworn I heard the president say, "The football!" I could have sworn.
I don't think that's what he said.
It sounded so much like it, and I was thinking, is this really your priority right now?
I don't know.
Go back and
what
watch
it was he said. No, I remember the bit you're talking about because you insisted we go back and hear that again.
I couldn't believe what I heard.
I know. It's a funny thought, though.
It's very much an action thriller of the type we don't really see anymore.
Yeah.
Of the Die Hard ilk.
Yeah.
Action-packed, but not so action-packed to suspend disbelief.
Yeah. The fight choreography is very down to earth in this one.
It's very enclosed, and it uses its space really well, because obviously nearly all of this movie takes place on Air Force One, and all of the action takes place on the plane, and being of only a finite, condensed size, you would expect it to be very difficult to have good action scenes. But they do it very well.
Yeah, no, they manage it.
And they use the scenery well, like there's a fight in this small office on the plane where the president's chucking this guy over chairs and he's being suplexed and he takes out like a champ.
Yeah.
It's believable action. You can believe this because obviously the terrorists have military experience. They served in Afghanistan, I think they say at one point.
Yeah, and so does the president.
The president served in Vietnam, so it's very believable that these people have these abilities.
Yeah.
And my biggest gripe with a lot of modern action movies is they go a bit fantastical, especially with their action. For example, I think the new Fast and Furious movie is set in space.
I don't have a problem with them going over the top, but there is definitely a place for the more understated stuff.
Yeah, I like my action movies a bit more grounded, believable, up close and personal. And that's what I liked about this. You could see the sweat on the guys' foreheads when they were fighting each other.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the fighting was hand-to-hand. And I think as an action thriller, it does an amazing job of building up suspense, keeping it. As soon as one horrible thing's dealt with, another comes up. Even when the terrorist character is killed, with 30 minutes left to go, they've got to deal with MiGs that are trying to shoot them down. They've got to deal with trying to get off the plane.
The way Harrison Ford kills Gary Oldman in that film is brutal.
I remember you being quite shocked, and you didn't...
I was.
He snaps the guy's neck using a parachute.
Yeah, a parachute and a seatbelt of some kind, I think.
Yeah, and that's where the iconic "get off my plane" line comes from.
Yeah, you just see Gary Oldman's corpse parachuting down, and
it lingers on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, that is one hell of a shot.
The terrorists do get memorable deaths. I did feel for Mr. Ditovich, who was in this.
Oh, Mr. Ditkovich. He just wanted his rent money.
Yes, my money! He's the right-hand man of the main terrorist. And what I like about this is that the villains aren't caricatures.
No.
You get the sense of camaraderie between them and friendship between them. For example, when one of the first terrorists is killed by the president who's hiding in the shadows and picking them off one by one, Gary Oldman finds his body and says, find the man who did this to him or you lie next to him.
Yeah, that was...
So you really get the idea that he's angry that his friend has been killed and he's upset about it.
Yeah, that was a really good line that was a lot better than Speaks in Russian would have been.
I can't believe that Netflix missed that. If it's more than 2 or 3 times, then you can assume that the dialogue in a foreign language is probably extremely important to the plot.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's really lazy. Also, the Jurassic Park 3 man is in it. He's another right-hand man of the president. He's the one who's loyal to him and gets killed at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I know the one you mean. It was you.
I just love President Jesus in this.
President Jesus?
I call him President Jesus because he's the Jesus of presidents.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's just too nice.
While also being a badass army vet.
Yes. When we say vet, we mean veteran. We don't mean that he helped animals. Although I believe he would if he could.
Yeah, he may well have done.
All he needed was a pet dog, and his whole nice guy thing is complete.
Well, we don't know that he didn't have one.
Could have done. You wouldn't bring one on a plane, would you?
No.
But the action is just incredible when they land Air Force One, because the first thing you're thinking is, well, why don't they just land the plane? They do. And then the terrorists break in, kill the pilots, and take off again. But what I think's really incredible about that scene is that the pilots would rather die than do what the terrorists tell them to do.
Yeah, they...
Which again, it shows how much respect they have for the president.
They refuse their orders and get killed for it, and to be fair, I doubt they know that the terrorists were capable of taking off themselves. So, I guess they were thinking, okay, maybe we die, but at least these terrorists will get caught. But they didn't know
Exactly.
that they actually knew how to fly the plane, and they were going to get it back in the air anyway.
Well, it is desirable to have a pilot if you're hijacking a plane, but yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a life and death situation, and I don't care how professional you are. If you don't respect your commander-in-chief, then you're not going to give your life for them in a life or death situation.
No, that's true.
And I do love that 90s CGI. It's used sparingly, and it's actually... I say 90s CGI, I don't mean it disparagingly in this case, whereas I usually do. The few times where they do employ it are really impressive. In fact, I would estimate that roughly a half of the budget of this film probably went into the part where the mid-air refueling plane explodes.
That was really good.
That was a great 3 seconds where Air Force One flies under the explosion. In fact, I remember in my videotape that I had, Channel 4 used that as the ident before and after the commercials ended, along with a silhouette of Harrison Ford.
It's eye-catching, isn't it?
Yeah, and it definitely sums up this movie, I think.
Yeah.
So, did this movie exceed your expectations?
It did, yeah. I mean, I was shocked at the lead terrorist death, even though I'd seen it before, so I guess that counts.
Yeah, because when you just hear his neck snap, you just went, ooh!
Yeah. Oh, I like the score as well. There's a suitably... What's a good word here?
Gravitas.
Yeah, there is a suitable amount of gravitas to the score, and it's particularly like in that one moment where you see the president has escaped into a vent. You know, the score swells like we're supposed to be impressed, and we are.
Yeah, and the soundtrack for any of the action scenes is just so intense.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and the main sort of theme of the film. I'm not speaking thematically, I'm talking about the music, has actually been used a lot by various presidential candidates over the years at rallies and speeches.
Of course.
Because of course it has. So if there's any long-lasting legacy of this film, it's probably going to be the soundtrack. Because it's probably going to be one of those things that in 60 years' time, presidential candidates are still going to be using this music, and they might not even know why at this point, because the movie's been forgotten in the annals of history.
And remade at least twice.
I love saying that word, annals. It makes me feel like I'm getting away with something.
Did it exceed my expectations, though? Yes, it did. The acting was really good. Like, we haven't really mentioned how good the acting is, but that's because it's so consistently good that nothing particularly stands out.
Well, I was going to bring that up in the next section, because that is what particularly appeals to me.
Oh, right. Well, when I say nothing stands out, that's not a diss. It's all really consistent.
Yeah, there's not really any aspect of the movie that drags it down, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and by the way, if you want to watch this movie back, it's at the 22 minute 15 seconds mark that you can hear the president shout, "The football!" So look out for that. Sorry, this is what I think would actually happen if Air Force One got hijacked. It feels like all the contingencies that they had in place are what they would actually be doing. It just feels very grounded in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like the lighting of this film was good.
It was.
It wasn't dim, and a lot of action movies are, and you can't really tell what's going on. It's light enough, but it's also dark enough, because almost the entirety of this movie is set at night time.
Yeah. And, well, when it's dark, it's appropriate that it would be dark, like at the prison, which, oh yeah, you mentioned that it was the same prison from the Shawshank Redemption.
That's right, it's the Shawshank prison.
Ah. Yeah. But yeah, when they're about to release the guy, that's one of the moments I'm talking about of it being suitably dark for the tone and the situation.
That is such an excellent dark moment of the soul scene, because
the
music just sounds eerie, and it's so good when you hear the prisoners chanting Radek and him putting on his uniform and going out, and like this is what they've been afraid of this whole movie, and it's happening. That they really give the moment the gravity it deserves.
Yeah. And then they shoot him.
Yes, and I love that scene where all of the president's staff in the White House are celebrating this, and it just spins around them really quickly. In Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants review, you heard me saying I really don't like that spinny effect where the camera spins around the girls while they're talking. They do something similar here, but it feels right because it goes faster. No, it starts slower and then goes faster, and it doesn't outstay its welcome. It really feels like the world's turning on its hinges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And the way the music continues through the celebrating, I can't put my finger on why that moment is so good, but it just is. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know Radic from Peter or Paul, but the way that they shoot that scene makes me feel strong feelings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so it exceeds my expectations every time because there's a small thing I noticed that I think is really good. I feel like this movie went through a lot of editing and rewrites to make sure it was perfect. Everything feels meticulous.
Yeah, yeah. It really stands up to scrutiny, doesn't it? Apart from the one thing with the milk carton, but that's hilarious enough that I'll give it a pass.
Yeah, it's a cheesy kind of good. It's sort of like when you hear a reverend talking, they're saying, well, I noticed something quite interesting when I was in the fridge the other day. The milk was very much like the body of Christ. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're thinking, no one ever thinks these things. You're just trying to shoehorn it in. Although another cheesy thing I liked was the very clear Arial fonts for the electronic countermeasures on Air Force One's displays.
Yeah, that was some Windows 95 stuff.
Yeah, because apparently Air Force One runs on Windows 95 and Microsoft PowerPoint. How much fuel have we got left? I don't know. I'll start the presentation. We'll find out. Oh, and another really cheesy, sentimental moment that I have to mention is the crossing the wires scene where the president has to cut the fuel.
Oh, yeah.
From the plane, and there's 5 wires, and he's being talked through it on the phone by his staff. And they're saying you have to cut the yellow wire. There's a yellow, green, red, white, and blue wires. And you have to cut another wire, but it cuts out before he can say what the other wire is. And of course, the president puts all his faith in the red, white, and blue, and it pays off.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. There's this one bit, like, this is the one immersion breaker for me,
Go on.
is that he has a 90s mobile phone in his pocket.
Yeah.
And the entire White House office can hear what he's saying clearly, despite him calling from a plane on a 90s mobile phone. And it being quite far from his mouth. Anyway, that phone's in his pocket. So, it's obscured by fabric and quite far from his mouth. And not to mention, phones were shit in the 90s and he's on a plane. And yet everyone...
In fairness, they do acknowledge that because the signal does cut out.
Yeah. But they can hear him clearly when he gives that order to the people in the White House. But then I suppose it's an Air Force One phone, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it can withstand a nuclear blast and bullets.
You could get a call out to aliens on that thing.
In fairness, I think it is one of those radio phones that have a stronger signal than your average mobile. I don't think it was just a Nokia that they got from Carphone Warehouse.
Alright, fair enough.
Well, all I can say about that is we're very lucky that the president's engineers were patriotic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got to be red, white and blue, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It is cheesy, but the way everything else is quite grounded, especially the combat is very realistic. You don't have Kung Fu POTUS.
That's a great way to describe this movie. Kung Fu POTUS. Love it. Also, another product placement, there's Bounty in the luggage.
Yeah.
And when I say Bounty, I mean the paper that I think is now known as Plenty in the UK.
Yeah, because we also have a confectionery, a chocolate bar called Bounty, which is what I think of when you say Bounty. So it's probably for the best that they changed it to Plenty.
Yeah, that's exactly why I elaborated then.
Yeah.
But As well as Mr. Ditkovich, there's also Mikhail from Lost who appears in this.
Yeah.
He's one of the
Yeah,
terrorists.
the president chokes him out with a sleeper hold, doesn't he?
That's right. He's weird because the actor who plays him always seems to play Russian characters because Mikhail from Lost was Russian, but he himself is from Venezuela.
I don't know why, but I find that funny.
It's a lot like Rusev, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ollie, would you say that there is an aspect of this film that particularly appeals to you?
I suppose the score is something I would like particularly. Gary Oldman is always great, so put him in a movie, I'm probably going to watch it.
Yeah, I would say the acting in general was the strongest point for me.
Yeah, I would agree. The acting, it's pretty well written as well, and it's a nice, wholesome people working together story. Like I said, like with The Martian,
which I think Sean Bean miraculously survived.
Yeah, he did. Like, it's a nice, uncomplicated, here's a problem, let's all try to deal with it kind of story.
Yeah. And I like that it's not just the president doing it all. He's the one who saves his people and makes sure they all get off the plane, but everybody plays a part. And I like the movies that respect their tertiary characters. Like the woman who he promises will become the Postmaster General if the whole fax thing works, not only thinks of using the fax machine to call for help, but also thinks of the parachute thing, I think.
Yeah. I want to see a sequel where she actually is the Postmaster General.
Well, this guy's true to his word, so he'll be Postmaster General.
Yeah.
I like the Vice President, played by Glenn Close. She was very good in this because she kept her cool throughout. She, again, resisted the... It's not even a temptation because from a practical aspect, there's a good argument.
At that point, it was protocol.
Exactly. It was protocol that if the president was under duress and couldn't make uncompromised decisions on behalf of the country, the cabinet could remove him and appoint the vice president. But she is the only one who doesn't sign that paperwork just because of her blind faith.
Yeah, at that point, she's got everyone to sign the paperwork, and, well, the rules dictate that she does that. She went against protocol on faith in President Harrison Ford, and that's just lovely.
It is. It is. It's really nice, and I just like how selfless all of the public servants are in this movie.
Yeah, it's refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sweet and it's naive, but for a 2-minute film, it's nice escapism because at the end of the day, that's what action and thriller is as a genre. It's escapism.
Yeah.
But with enough grounded realism for us to be able to relate to the characters and go, oh, that's gotta hurt when a character punches another character.
Yeah.
Because you know they're not superhumans. You know that when a guy gets punched in this movie, they feel it as if you'd get punched.
Yeah.
And it is sad that the action genre has sort of declined these days.
Yeah.
It lives on in science fiction, I suppose, but I'd like to see more grounded films like this set in the real world.
Yeah.
I say the real world, I don't think that Kazakhstan has a nuclear arsenal in the real world. But we will forgive that tiny detail. I do like how long it takes for President to cut through the duct tape when he's tied up and finally caught.
Yeah.
That is Air Force One duct tape. It can keep a whole plane together. If you saw a plane in half and tape it with Air Force One duct tape, it's not going to fall apart.
Yeah, that duct tape is bulletproof. You could wear it under your clothes as like protection.
It's like flex tape. Why does Uzbekistan get an abbreviation on the map, but not Kazakhstan? They're both similar length names for countries. Do they not have room for Uzbekistan?
Is it the extra syllable when you say it verbally? Like,
I don't know. Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Similar lengths. Why do they abbreviate one but not the other?
I don't know.
How does the film hold up today?
I'm not sure. Like, I mean, it's good, and there aren't that many things, like, apart from the phone, there aren't that many things to tie it to a time period, but also, like, depending on the geopolitical situation at the time you watch it, it may or may not create some immersion breaks.
I mean, this doesn't really reflect any real geopolitical situation that has ever existed, to be fair.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I guess it does hold up pretty well.
I'd be very curious to know when this movie was written, actually, because it would have been... Well, the film came out 5 years after the end of the Soviet Union, 6 years after. Obviously, it was written after that happened, but I'd be interested to know how recently afterwards.
Yeah.
Because filmmakers must have been chomping at the bit to tell stories about post-Soviet Russia at that point, because it was a huge world event and it was new, and it opened up a lot of possibilities. For example, GoldenEye does a good job of doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, the Soviets are very rarely the antagonists, even in early Bonds, but being able to separate yourself from that period of time to write new stories must have been quite liberating for Bond at the time.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Not unlike people from East Berlin breaking down the Berlin Wall so that they can go and see David Hasselhoff. Because that's why... No, it wasn't David Hasselhoff. It was Rocky at the end of Rocky IV that ended the Cold War.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is in historical books. This is how it happened.
Yeah.
Because if I can change and you can change, then anybody can change.
Yeah.
The film holds up quite well for me.
More political conflicts, more international conflicts should be settled with one boxing match.
Yeah, that would save so much time and hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it holds up quite well for me. Most of the effects and the action are still decent to this day. The only bit that looks a bit silly and flimsy is at the very end where Air Force One crashes into the Caspian Sea, and you can see in the doorway the guy who betrayed them, who obviously got left behind because he betrayed them. And he's wailing and going, oh, and you can still hear this over the crashing and the waves, and I love that.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so over the top and cheesy, and the plane looks so crap when it's falling apart. You can tell that's from the 90s.
Yeah.
I have a theory that they had that as one of two really strong CGI set pieces. The first being the impressive explosion of the refueler, and the second being that. But they already blew most of the budget on the refueling scene, so they were left with the Plan B, serviceable but really silly-looking Windows 95 CGI for the plane crashing.
Yeah.
Bless them, they tried, and that scene is so over the top and amusing that it gets a pass for me. So, would you say that the film was received appropriately at the time?
How did it do financially? This is normally where we'd ask that question.
Okay. Release date was July the 20th. No, that's not what you asked. The budget, Ollie, was 85 million, so almost a complete Bicentennial Man.
Yeah.
Almost a complete unit of Bicentennial.
Yeah.
And the box office was 315.2 million.
So 3.15 Bicentennial Men.
Yeah, I call that stonks.
Stonks indeed.
Yeah, I would be happy with that if I were Columbia and Touchstone Pictures.
And what about the audience, critics and audience reception?
I'm quite curious.
I can't imagine it being panned. I cannot imagine why critics wouldn't like this.
No. As an aside, the daughter and the wife were really good in this. When I said the acting was good, I mean across the board. No one gives a shit performance.
No. Everyone brought it.
Wait, why is The More You Ignore Me on Rotten Tomatoes? That came out years ago, but it's listed as a new release. That's weird.
Is it a remake?
Well, no, it only came out 3 years ago. No, it's the same movie. Okay, that's weird. Anyway, critics' consensus on it.
Yeah.
78%.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty much how I feel. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Seems about right.
And they say that the late period Harrison Ford actioner is full of palpable, if not entirely seamless, thrills.
Yep, seems fair.
Yeah, that's fair. Audience score is 66%. Again, I don't know what 34% of people wanted that they didn't get.
Yeah, this is true.
At the end of the day, this movie delivers exactly what it promises. It promises action with the President of the United States fighting terrorists on his plane, and that's what it gives you.
Yeah, and it's a very good version of that.
And it gives you more, because I'm not even sure that Mr. Ditkovich was in the trailer, and he was in the movie.
And it's become quite a nice film because, as you said, the soundtrack is used quite a bit. So yeah, I'd say it was received appropriately at the time.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I think everybody should put on at least once just to see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think if there's going to be any lasting legacy of this film, it'll be the soundtrack, because, like I say, it's sort of been a part of the American political zeitgeist since it came out, and it's going to continue to be. I think it's going to become sort of the traditional tune for presidents.
I mean, it might take on new meaning if Harrison Ford actually does run for president one day.
Well, the thing is, he lives the lifestyle of his characters, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I like that.
Yeah, and I like that news story from a few years ago about him having a private plane and he accidentally landed it on the wrong runway and nearly got mowed over by an airliner. That just feels like something from an Indiana Jones film. I love it. You mean to say we're on the wrong runway?
And then he turns around and sees people shouting, "Get that plane back in the air now!"
Yeah. My favourite Mr. Dictovich line in this movie. He has eyes like a fox and ears like a rodent. I love it. And good old Andrew Divoff doing his Russian guy bit.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. I enjoyed watching this film. I enjoyed.
So did I.
In summation?
This isn't a huge milestone movie. It's a Saturday night thing that you watch on telly with a bowl of popcorn on your couch. And it's a bloody good one of those.
Yeah, if I invited some friends over, I'd probably suggest watching this with a few buds. Yeah. Oh my god, the movie's working on me already. Got some Budweisers. You got enough Perrier and Bounty there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mopped up the Perrier that I accidentally spilt earlier. Bounty really is the best toilet paper.
Couldn't really find any bulletproof milk, though.
No.
Well, the milk wasn't bulletproof. That was
hell.
The point.
It was semi-skimmed too. Okay. Well, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes. See you next week.
Yeah, I mean, we really shouldn't be there next Sunday, but we will be.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even supposed to be here today.
No, we're not. So, we will see you then.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.